Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of three Psalms: Psalm 23, Psalm 90, and Psalm 103. And we're at the beginning of this study, and we're looking at Psalm 23. Yesterday, when we were together, the last time we were together, I should say, um, we read Psalm 23, and we just talked about it generally, about its place in the hymn book, about its place in that first book of Psalms, its connection to the psalm in front of it, the psalm after it, as messianic psalms, and how verse 1 really is David's statement of faith, that David understands that he himself is the lamb and that God is his shepherd, and that since he spent his formative years as a shepherd, protecting the flock, his small flock, from lions and bears and having to fight them off, he knows what it means to have someone looking out for you, being responsible for your welfare and your well-being and your continued existence. And he came to a realization as a young man that he had someone doing that for him, and that it was God. It was the God of heaven and earth, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let's read Psalm 23 again, talk a little bit about its content and its structure. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I hope that we noticed right off that David does what David usually does, generally does, which is in his singing, in his writing, talk to God and then talk to us as well. And in this psalm, we have three sections. Whenever he talks to us, when he talks to God, you are with me, your rod, your staff, they comfort me, you prepare a table. And then where he talks to us again, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord, third person there, forever. So we have those three sections, and they basically are three verses in this one psalm. In fact, this psalm is structured around the number three, and you can find lots of threes in this psalm. I just want to point a few out. There are the three sections um, in verses 1 through 3, verse 4, and verses 4 and 5, and then verse 6. Those are the three different sections. He, you, and he. Those are the three sections. There are also three sections in which David goes from being God's sheep, God's lamb, um, to someone who sits at the table, a human being, a person that God is hosting, to someone who actually lives in God's house, not as a guest, but as a family member, and will dwell in the house forever. I hope you noticed David's expectations for eternity. David has expectations for eternity in Psalm 23 that we are not going to see in Psalm 90 when Moses writes. We don't have that expectation at all. But we do have it here. It's a very New Testament thing to think. And yet David has that faith and has that belief in his future and in his relationship with God. There are three, so we talked about the three sections, the three stations of David's existence as the lamb, as the person that God is hosting here on this earth, and then David as God's family member living in his house into eternity. And then there are the three blessings. There are the three blessings now and the three blessings later on. Three blessings now are that God leads me, feeds me, and protects me. The three blessings later on is that I have goodness, I have mercy, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So there are five threes right there that we just talked about. David begins, you can almost hear Johann Sebastian Bach's air from one of his cantatas, Sheep May Safely Graze. in verses 1 through 3, because it's very calm, it's quiet, still. I lie down in green pastures. I lie down beside still waters. He restores my soul. So we know he's speaking spiritually. Um, and he leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Now, then, the paths of righteousness, that's not stillness. That's not calmness. That's passing through the valley of the shadow of death. Because here on earth, we live in a sinful world. And God has enemies, and his people have enemies, but he's still there. We can't avoid the valley of the shadow of death, but we're not afraid because you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The rod and the staff. The shepherd's crook was there to guide the sheep, to rescue the sheep, could hook around the sheep's neck, around the sheep's hind leg, pull the sheep away from danger, out of danger. And the rod, that's the club. That's what David used to whack the lion on the head with when he grabbed him by his mane and then yanked the lamb out of his mouth. So we have direction, we have protection, and we have rescue in the rod and the staff. And then in that last, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. We're now a person, not a sheep anymore. God is hosting us. And those around would like to get to us, but they can't because God's there, serving us, giving us all that we need. And then anointing my head with oil. That's hospitality, but it's also the anointing of the king. And it's also the Messiah, because the word Messiah means the anointed one. That's what it means. Messiah means anointed one. This is clearly a messianic psalm. My cup overflows. And then goodness and mercy, both those words are key New Testament words, especially mercy. Hesed, covenant loyalty. God keeps his promises, will follow me all the days of my life. And then there we have eternity. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Okay, there's just so much more to the text. We want to talk about the connection between Psalm 23 and Psalm 90. Next time, we're going to just have to dabble in Psalm 90 to talk about that, but we'll do that next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.